I like to use the phrase, we float the needles to the top of the haystack. In close races, we can give you more insight on election night than you've ever had before, so you kind of know where you're going to have to look for your official count. You know, you see something like this and wonder what it is, and you know, we'll show you those things. You may or may not need to see it, but our system knows enough that, hey, this might be something that the Board of Elections needs to see. And by the same token, at the bottom of the screen, we have...
Can I actually hop in before you move to the next part? So I do just want to tie this back specifically because this is one area of us making an improvement based on a customer request and customer feedback. The sort for uncaptured voter intent was not in the initial version of our software. It was our first round of audit clients in Florida that kind of understood how our system works based on scoring and pixelation that asked us to develop that in. And we did, because they said, wouldn't that be nice if you could float everything up to the top that had any type of pixelation in the entire area for circumstances like that, like circling. So that's a direct function of client feedback, which I think is important for you guys to know.
Great point.
So even though we're looking at George Smith right now, and you brought up the ballot, and we saw that there's probably 7 other contests that should be changed, I guess. Like could all of that be adjudicated right then, even though we're only looking at George Smith?
So kind of procedurally and best practices, if we went into this particular ballot and to give this vote to George Smith, you can actually go through the rest of it too. And procedurally, you would want to do that. Why touch it twice? And so you can go through and make sure, is there anything else on this ballot that should be done as well? And you can do it here, and then it removes it from all of the other areas where you might have seen it. So if you found multiple...
And this was actually an area where we got a lot of feedback was, instead of having to do you talked about what are the process, instead of having to do the process, then you have to pick a candidate, look at the candidate, figure out where those marginal marks are. Why do we look at marginal marks overall, right? Or marginal marks by batch, right? Which how people think about it. And so we have some ability to look at all the marginal marks at one time, but we're integrating the ability to look at marginal marks effectively by batch, so that it can happen. If you scan a batch or a couple batches a day, or whatever it is, you can then go review those at the end of the day.
So to look in your question, if we modified this adjudication, and I actually won't take the time to go through it all, but you'll see that you can actually go ahead and do the rest of the ballot. So if there were multiple areas you needed to look at, you could take care of this ballot at once.
Is there also a way to track who is adjudicating this?
There is, by login, time and date stamped, yep. and always a clickable link to go back to that ballot to look at it again. And I'll show you that before we're done too. The last thing on the vote visualization screen is the bottom. And these are actually votes for other candidates. So if I hover over this, that's a pretty clear vote for Jonathan Hart. But remember, we're dealing with George Smith and his votes. So if you notice what we filtered up to the top, in other words, we don't know what's going on here, but we think you might want to look at it. So if we look at that, to vote for Adam Martin, and this is a great time to tell you, our software and our algorithm is actually set up to take into account the consistency with which the voter marks the ballot. So how do they mark the ballot in totality goes into how we determine how these votes should be distributed. So if I click on this particular dot and you see this ballot, okay, you can see this voter marked this ballot pretty consistently, and I would say it's pretty obvious what their intent was. So you also see this mark in George Smith's oval. Well, we showed that to you in case you needed to see it. I would argue this ballot is done, and it's adjudicated exactly the way it needed to be. But we know enough, our software is smart enough to say, there's pixelation here that is voter marked. So this is probably, they rested their pen there, maybe they started to vote for George Smith. They ended up voting for Adam Martin, which is the way we counted the ballot. But again, we show it to you just in case. And this is a good screen to show you something that James and I always refer to as kind of a self-audit tool. Maybe you are wondering exactly how and why this ballot was counted the way it was. We have a link that we call the visually annotated card, which, by the way, also shows the roadmap to how to find this card. It's in early voting batch number 72, and that would be card number 10. So you could go find that exact piece of paper if you wanted to.
Image numbers front and back, so you just divide it by 2, and that's the number that it is.
So if I click on the annotated card link, look what happens. So what we've done is we overlay the results database on top of the voter's artwork. And we say, you know, this is why we counted it this way. Is it correct? Well, a vote for Adam Martin, you know, you can see that that is probably correct. Same thing with the rest of these votes. And these are really 2 independent databases laid on top of each other. So you can see, you know, do you agree with the way this was counted? And, you know, obviously we don't think you're going to do this to 6, 7, or 800,000 ballots, right? But if you ever have a question, you can always see this view for any individual card in order to see that.
Hey, if you're a fan of statistical methodology as well, you can tell the system to generate and pull however many cards you want randomly out of your entire population of ballots and review that and make sure that the database is counting them correctly.
So, to James's point, we have 283 cards that we've scanned here, and I think I want to look at a random 25. There they are. I want to look at the same random 25, so I'm going to seed that, let's just say with 3. And now every time I seed it with that same number, I will see the exact same random number of cards. If I seed it with a different number, it'll be a different set of random cards. So we give you some tools for auditing that way. One of our colleagues, and I love the way he presents this, he says that we give you data on paper ballots that you have never seen before and never had the ability to see before. So maybe you want to look at your database and you want to see the worst marked ballots, regardless of candidate, regardless of race. Here they are. So you can start to look at these, and maybe you see that these are all coming from the same scanner. Maybe you're going to see that they're all coming from mail-ins. Maybe almost all of these are from a nursing home visit. And you can start to plan your election around solving some of these issues. And you can tell these are not well filled in ballots, right? So we can slice and dice that data like you've never been able to before. We go back to our dashboard here. A couple other things worth noting. Our scanners generally don't stop. Obviously, a ballot can be destroyed and to the point where it won't go through a scanner. But if you can get an image of the ballot, we will save you work on the back end. You can probably tell why this ballot couldn't be tabulated, which is where I am right now, the untabulatable images. Well, it's very obvious why this couldn't be tabulated. I can still see this as precinct 1. I can see it's my issues only version. I can say this is votable. Yeah. Let's do something else first. Let's tell it the front side of the card, which it couldn't even tell. And then we can distribute these votes. And the thing I like about this, having sat on your side of the desk, is we don't put anything in between what the voter turned in and that result. If somebody says, how do I know that you remade this ballot correctly? Well, you can show them this and say, well, pretty obvious here, this was a no vote for the local option. You know, you don't have to say, trust me, we did it with a team of 2. Now, you would probably do this process with a team of 2 as well. But you still have that original voter's document to look at, if that makes sense.
The original document is always maintained, so ballot integrity is always maintained. You can always go back to that original document, and it's never been modified in any way.
Jordan brought up different pieces of paper. I don't pretend that you get a ton of these, even in Cuyahoga County, but this FWOP would be a legal ballot in every jurisdiction in the country with the proper paperwork. We can actually distribute votes using this scan. Again, not having to get out a blank ballot necessarily, not putting anything between the voters, turned in document and their votes, and you can distribute votes, especially if you're wearing your glasses, based on this document. So if it can go through one of our scanners, you can digitally adjudicate it and add it to your totals. And once again, if your procedures are going to dictate getting a blank ballot out, you can still do that too. That's up to you. So something like this, maybe you wouldn't want to scan it for whatever reasons you guys have. What else, James? What did I miss?
Standard reporting, but I do also want to hop into ballot creation. What time have these generally gone until? I know we have a lot to show you still, so I just want to keep things moving to a certain extent. Any reporting that you guys need, we have a PDF report generator, we have an XML report generator, so you can get it in any type of file formats that you realistically need. And we can slice the data probably in more ways than you're used to. And with other systems, you really can. The way that the system's architected, everything is database driven.
And there's
so we can-
customizable
Yeah.
things that we sit down at the beginning, these XML reports that, match
Yeah.
in our system.
Anything you see on the screen that kind of looks like the grid or database or Excel spreadsheet style, you can export those. I actually need to update.
I think you asked a question about the benefits of digital tabulation. This is one of them, right? Because now all of a sudden you have a database of a lot of stuff that can be cut and provided in a different way because you're taking a digital image and you can cross-reference stuff. That's not the same when you're just taking an optical scan and you're counting it right there. That's it before you.
And again, you probably wouldn't be looking at things like the vote visualization on election night. We're not saying that you're going to review every contest and add that to what you guys have to do. We know what the goal is on that night, right? But you may pull up what